does. So let's look for a second at some of the different sort of things that are the basics of compression. And we will start here with threshold. And I know everybody knows this, so it's a little bit of a repetition, but this will also be a cool video where you can look back and sort of clarify anything that might be hazy. And then we'll move on to some more advanced stuff. So what? Threshold. What is threshold? Threshold is the sensitivity control below which no downward compression happens, no gain reduction happens, and above which the compressor knows that there's something to do. That is threshold. And attack is the reaction time of the compressor. Once the threshold is, exceeded, then the attack time is the amount of time it takes for the gain reduction to start to kick in. And the release is, of course, once the signal has fallen below the threshold, the amount of time it takes for the compressor to stop, to begin to stop turning it down, essentially. And the ratio, of course, is an expression of the gain reduction, where the amount of allowed, the amount of the increase in signal that's allowed becomes a ratio or a sort of a fraction of the intention. And we'll talk about all this. And then, of course, there's makeup gain. Makeup gain being, with all this turning down that's happening with downward compression, we're losing signal, so that there is a gain stage after all of this dynamic turning up and down by the voltage controlled amplifier. There's a static gain addition to kind of level it out for you. Okay, so again, just looking at these basics here. Threshold, sensitivity parameter, it's a voltage detector below which no gain reduction takes place and above which compression is activated. The attack is time-based. So it's the amount of time that it takes the compressor to start compressing once the threshold has been upwardly crossed. It's the reaction time of the compressor. And just to be super clear, if you want something more compressed in terms of the transients, you want a faster attack time, right? If you want something to be more percussive, you want a slower attack time. So if you wanted if you want to induce more compression and control and make things less percussive in terms of the initial transients, you want a fast attack time. The release is also time-based. And it's the amount of time that the compressor takes to stop doing gain reduction once the threshold has been downwardly crossed. So the threshold, if the attack is really an adjustment of the percussive transients of a signal, then the release is your control for the sustain of a signal. And if you want something more compressed, it's the opposite of the attack. You want a long release. A long release creates more compression. A fast release lets go quicker, and it creates a less compressed signal that's also more dynamic, a little more bouncy in the sustain, right? So it's sort of a sustain control in hiding in a way. The ratio is the severity of the compression once it crosses the threshold and the attack time has been achieved and the gain reduction kicks in. How much gain reduction, right? So, and it always is an expression of the intention and the actual amount it's allowed to go up. So if you have a 2-to-1 ratio and the signal wants to go 4 dB above the threshold, the 2-to-1 ratio will only allow it to go 2 dB up. So that's the thing, right? It's still allowing it to exceed the threshold and to be dynamically expressive, but it's cutting it in half, right? That's what a 2-to-1 ratio is. And a 4-to-1 ratio, if it wants to go 4 dB above threshold, it only allows it to go up 1 dB. So that's more strict, right? Or a 4-to-1 ratio, and it by 2-to-1 ratio, 4 dB, if it wants to go 4 dB above the threshold with a 2-to-1 ratio, it only allows it to go up 2 dB. So now within the world of ratios, it's good to think of them as light, medium, and high ratios. Light, medium, and high, I guess. So gentle ratios is 1.5 to 1 or 3 to 2. And that's very, very often seen in mastering compressors and in bus compression on fancier things. A 1.5 to 1 or a 3 to 2 is typically the lowest ratio. Then we move to 2 to 1, which we said is sort of decreases the increase in gain above the threshold by 50%, 2 to 1, and it's a light ratio. It still can be quite transparent, and it still also keeps quite a bit of the dynamics. 2.5 is a great ratio to use. It's light, but it's a little bit stronger than 2 to 1, and it's very, very musical. It works incredibly well. And 3 to 1 is also a nice light ratio. 4 to 1, 5 to 1, and 6 to 1 are medium ratios. And 8, 9, and 10 are high ratios, and they start to sort of become limiting. Now, so that's the ratio game. The makeup gain is like this. Really, auto makeup gain is sort of a digital phenomenon. However, API sort of figured out how to do it in analog. And if you have the API Vision console strip, when you use that compressor, even though it's analog, it has auto makeup gain. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. But usually on most musical vintage compressors, when you start doing lots of gain reduction, you notice the signal get quieter. And as the signal gets quieter, it kind of makes you feel like it's making it weaker. And sometimes it makes it hard for you to appreciate the compacting of the sound, the power that you're putting into the sound. So you have to manually guess what some of the gain reduction is and set it by hand. The nice thing about auto makeup gain, and it's in a lot of digital compressors, is as you make the adjustments to the threshold, attack, and release, the auto makeup gain is very carefully looking at the amount of gain reduction that it feels that is happening, and it's adding it back to the output. So as you squeeze down on something, instead of it feeling like it's getting weaker, it feels like it's getting stronger. And good, using the phone. That you cannot be stopped. This technology. We'll sort you out, Mel. You're new to this new little online club. We'll get you all dialed in. You're here with some people who've been doing this for a minute, but it's so good to see you. Okay, good. Use that phone. So now we know auto makeup gain also from limiters and maximizers, right? When we squeeze down on the threshold when we're mastering, or we're putting a bus limiter on the bus to preview what the master is going to be, as we pull down on that threshold, it's squeezing down, it's doing the limiting, but it's adding that auto makeup gain that just makes it sound louder, and bolder. So I'm a huge fan of the makeup gain. Let's look at auto release. Auto release is super cool. Auto release, like a fixed release, means that after the signal goes below the threshold, the compressor will wait this fixed amount of time to stop doing the gain reduction. And that works very good for very consistent kind of signals. But for signals that are moving around, for the compressor to track that signal, is a fixed release sometimes just is not your friend. If you have a quantized snare that's programmed where every velocity is straight, then you can set a fixed release and it's great. But if something's moving around on you like a jazz vocalist or a solo, guitar solo or anything, where there's a lot of variety in the dynamics, it's great to have the signal be able to be auto-tracked by an auto-release. So that is auto-release. And the knee is something that you don't always see on every compressor. But what the knee does is once the compressor is, once the threshold is crossed and the gain reduction is kicking in after the attack time, how quickly it goes to the ratio setting is the knee. And if it makes its way gently there over time, that's a soft knee. And if it kind of jumps directly to the ratio instructions, that's hard knee. Soft knee tends to be more transparent. Hard knee tends to be more limiting, like you almost have a sense of something knocking up against something. And they're both very useful. If you were doing some soft jazz singing, it would be soft knee for sure. But if you are doing some sort of compression on a picked guitar or maybe even a kick or a snare, you may want to have that sensation that it's knocking up or hitting against something. So in which case a hard knee is good. The super dope thing about Pro C2 is that it has a variable knee. And that's rare. Most times you have a hard knee or a soft knee, but not a variable knee. Another incredibly cool thing on Pro C2 is the range. And so what the range does is it can constrain the amount of gain reduction to a certain depth. It's like a depth limiter. So you can do lots and lots of compression, but only have it affect, stop at 1 dB of gain reduction or 2 dB of gain reduction or 3 dB of gain reduction. And this is very, very helpful when you're sidechaining, right? Sidechaining the bass and the kick. The amount that it's ducking, you have a threshold control, but then you can really fine tune the ducking amount with the range. Once you get, and it's something that you set typically last. And once you get good at it, it allows you to dial in exactly the amount of downward compression that you're looking. And then finally, there is a super cool thing, this hold thing. And hold is something that they took out of Pro G, which we'll look at too this month. And gates are kind of complicated. They're funny. You think they're simple, but they're not. We'll get into our gating. And essentially, what it is the hold function delays the release by the amount of time determined by the hold, and it keeps the gain reduction in a level, steady place. And this is very, very useful on a couple things. Very, very useful, again, for sidechain compression, but also very useful for like a ducking effect where, very, very typical for like radio announcers when they're talking over music, that they want the music to come up and be big. So the music is big when they're not talking, but when they start to talk, the music automatically dips because it's triggered by a sidechain trigger by the voice. But what you don't want is when the person's talking, for the music to rise up in between every syllable. It gets annoying. So when you lengthen the hold, it overrides the release time and keeps the gain reduction steady so that you could talk over the music, even take a little pause to breathe, and the music's not rising up in those pauses. But then when you're really finished talking, the music ramps up, right? So hold is very, very useful, especially for ducking stuff. All right, so let's do this. Let's go over to back to Logic, looking at Pro C2, and let's just kind of go through some of the other little things here.